Good morning. Is that good, brother? Brother Ricky, I sent you the picture through Messenger. The little visual. Okay, you got it. All right. So you look at that photo, if you've chosen to, or if you don't mind to look at it now. I think that there's one thing that's pretty evident. One person feels prominent, wouldn't you think? One person gives off this vibe of superiority, a vibe of preeminence. He is reigning over the others around him. As far as the picture image and how it looks, it gives off that air about the person. But it could be the person has a legitimate position within that realm of those people. He could be a manager. He could be the owner of a business, and whatever other position that you could use as an analogy. That's kind of the position per se isn't in any way important to the thought that I think the picture can convey. It is this feeling of preeminence and superiority. However, if you look at the people he's surrounded by, most of them are not looking at him. So maybe there's a feeling of they've been made to feel so beneath him that they can't even look up. There's I think two in the image that are actually doing that. It doesn't take much to figure out why they probably aren't looking up to him, isn't it? Sometimes when that air is given off of superiority or preeminence or whatever, it doesn't always give people the feeling or the comfort to look to that person. His body stance, his facial expression, they give off what would be simply probably put as an air of arrogance, wouldn't it? That's just the vibe that you get. And this is just a literally AI-generated photo. I love that AI does that because I have spent time in the past trying to find a visual. You try to find something that matches your thought. Now all I got to do is type in my description. And it can produce it and then fine-tune it if I ask it to. But I think it'd be safe to assume that every person sitting around that one individual in particular, they have been made to feel, or they have the assumption they're supposed to feel, as the phrase is, beneath him, wouldn't you say? And I thought, how horrible to think that somebody would want others to feel that way. That is terrible. And to think that in some cases, people do this intentionally. They'll keep people kind of pressed out of their own sense of their power feels threatened. Their authority feels threatened. So they'll do anything they can to do this, to press and squelch any ability for someone to ever think that they can question that individual. But how horrible you would think for anybody, and I would hope most would agree, hopefully everybody, that would be terrible for someone to want other people to feel that way. Now, there are people, I have a boss that's been my friend for over 20 years. But when I'm in my school building, guess how I have to view her? And it's respectful to view her as my superior. My assistant principal is very kind. I've been older than most of the past several assistant principals we've had. But I've always tried to remember he's my superior. I have no problem with that. But they don't make me feel like this person does in this photo. This person seems to make people under him feel. And I will listen. The reason for my even having some of these thoughts is I just so happened, and I went to YouTube, and when I went to YouTube, suggestions popped up, I think, and one of them was Goodwater Church of God. Do y'all know who's the pastor? Can you know who that is? Brother Mullins. Brother Mullins popped up. And so I think it's something, I follow several little churches, the Churches of God, and etc. But I don't know the last time I would have even seen that pop up. And I thought, well, how interesting. And he was live at the time. It was kind of late here. They're an hour behind us. And so I thought, I'll see what's going on. So I clicked it and I listened. I ended up hearing the very tail end of a message that I went back later and I've listened to all the way through. And man, it really just touched me as I listened. It was a phenomenal reminder for, I think, any individual that would listen to it with an open heart. A phenomenal reminder to be careful how I am around other people. Because you think about this person in that picture, is he really concerned about how those people around him feel? He's concerned about himself. He is concerned about his position. He's concerned about his authority, and then God forbid anybody threaten that. And that's the image I think that it could portray. So I happened to be on YouTube. I came across that Brother Mullins' message pop up, and I was catching the tail end of it, but I listened and I became very fascinated. Oh, thank you. I became quite fascinated. And one of the things he used, Romans 1:18. So I took, sometimes when we listen to something, two people can listen to the same thing but get very different thoughts because it touches us on a different level. And there was just certain things he mentioned that really stood out to me. In Romans 1:18, because I'd never thought about this verse in the way that he presented it. And I love stuff like that because it gives me food for thought. It gives me something to reflect on. In Romans 1:18, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. But this next little part of the verse, who hold the truth in unrighteousness. Everyone in here is capable of holding a baby. But does everyone hold a baby effectively or well? No. My wife does not. Now, don't be offended. Hopefully there may be future babies here, and I would love to hold your baby. And my wife will hold your baby, but she would have a preference for them when they hit about 2. That's just her preference. When we go somewhere, I love babies. I just always have thought they're just kind of sweet. There's the big fat faces, and maybe it resembled me in a little form. But I've just always found babies they're just cute as can be. Rhonda Ray she's like, that's your thing. And I'm like, okay. And so we'll look at the babies. But now when they're in toddler stage, she loves it. But she can hold a baby just fine. She's held a baby. She's helped raise a baby into toddler age when she was a foster mom. She can do it. But holding that baby for her is not the same as for someone that feels. Have you ever seen people who get a baby and you can tell they're just a natural? Often people who've been moms or dads or grandparents or whatever, aunts, uncles, whatever the case is. Some people can hold that baby and it's so different than when someone else can get it and the baby starts just screaming. And it's not that the person wants them to scream. They just don't hold the baby the same. And this was not an analogy used in his message, but the way we hold things can be effective or ineffective. You're still holding them, but it doesn't mean it's working. And he talked about who holds truth in unrighteousness. And you think about the man in our photo. He's the one I'll use as an analogy. That man can hold the truths of his company in his mind intellectually, can he? He knows every rule. He knows every way he's supposed to hold his subordinates into accountability. He may have all necessary information memorized. He may have a deep understanding of the rules and how they're supposed to be enacted. He may even apply them, quote unquote, perfectly while he's on the job. But what does he do with his knowledge? Is he applying his knowledge in ways that come across prideful, arrogant? Does he come across in his knowledge as it's suppressive to others? Someone holding a baby who's a natural, the baby coos and oos and it'll rear back and they just look relaxed. They hold that baby well. Someone else can hold the baby. They're holding the baby, but the baby feels uncomfortable. The baby feels the insecurity of the person who has it in its arms. The baby doesn't feel that same level of ability to relax because of how it's being held. And I'd never thought about that. I would never, to my personal self, have thought about that verse in that way, because you often think about people who misuse or who suppress truth. But there are more ways than just suppressing something. It's also how you demonstrate it. It's how are rules on the job demonstrated from a superior. They can make a law in how an employee forms an opinion of a company, can it? The same for truth. Is he applying his knowledge, that, let's say that boss in that picture, if that's a boss, in ways that could come across helpful, that could come across encouraging, that could come across in a way that uplifts? Based on the picture, I wouldn't think so, would you? That's not how what he's doing comes across. It really doesn't matter that he contains all the knowledge necessary for his position in his company, because what he's doing isn't making other people feel better about what they need to do, because he holds the truths of that company in such a way that it's pressing people down. And I thought, oh man, I don't want to do that with God's truth. I don't think anybody would wake up and want to do that on purpose. Any person who says they're a Christian and wants to do what's right. But how I hold truth, I can hold truth, but I can hold it in a way that is not effective, that doesn't produce good results, that doesn't encourage. It can oppress, suppress, press down. And I'd never thought about it necessarily in that context, the way I hold truth. And that was kind of the purpose. That actually wasn't the title of his message. It was called Trying the Spirits. It was a really good one if you want to listen to it in your private time for just your own little study and personal gratification. It doesn't matter how that man in that picture, it doesn't matter about all the knowledge he contains and the way and all the information he may have that he could share. If he shares it in a way that's demeaning, in a way that oppresses and demeans the people around him, that's a terrible way to present his knowledge and understanding. It's a terrible way to hold the truths of his company. It makes other people feel devalued. It makes other people feel less than, which is not conducive to a positive work environment. That's also not conducive to a positive spiritual experience someone could have with me if I make them feel that way, does it? And I take this is for me, anything that, if I listen, the goal should be, what can I learn personally? I mean, the devil can, or you can have all natural things that come to your mind or situations or scenarios, that's for sure outside of yourself. But bottom line, who will I give an account for? Me. And how do I hold God's truth? Does it demean, devalue, depress? Does it encourage? Does it uplift? Does it make someone wonder, never thought of it that way, but what more can I learn? Because two people can hold truth, but can leave people feeling very different ways. So which way would want my goal to be? But Brother Mullins made some comments that to me really struck a chord. And I really appreciated an example he gave. And, everybody brings their own experiences, especially when you listen to a different place. Those things are tailored. He would be giving that for his particular people. So, of course, one must exercise caution, but it doesn't mean you can't learn, But this is a scenario he shared, and I thought this was fascinating. I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone speak about something like this. We need to do more than brag about we have the truth. So many people are bragging about we have the truth to the point they present themselves as truth. And you look at that photo of that person at that company. If not careful, that person, if you ever met someone, they act like they are the company. They act like, well, they are the know-all, end-all, be-all. And anyone who asks them something, well, they just might as well come ask me. I know everything. And I don't know that anybody would want to battle that kind of spirit. But, it's not just good enough to have the truth. And I thought this was so fair. It put it in such a good perspective. It's one thing, because you know what? There are people who contain the truth. But how is my spirit? The person in that picture can have all the quote-unquote truth and understanding of what it means to work for that company. But what is his spirit when he demonstrates it to his employees? Because does it look like it's uplifting them? No. Does it look like it's encouraging them? No. So the spirit itself can be wrong, but the truth in and of itself might be right. But what are people going to get from that? What are they going to walk away remembering? What was shared? Nope. How it was shared. What was said, how it was presented. You can have the truth and the wrong spirit to go with it. And I thought, wow, that's something to really think about, isn't it? God, help me be careful of the spirit that I have. You can have the belief of Christ, the belief of biblical doctrines, and I may be paraphrasing some here. I tried to quote as much as I could, of biblical doctrines and teachings. But Paul said in Romans 1:18, the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. This isn't dealing with the heathen. You can be a professed believer, holding truths, but have the wrong spirit about you. And you are holding truth and unrighteousness. And I thought, well, that's as fair as you can get. God, help me to be cautious. Just like watching people holding a puppy. I loved the little puppy that was here yesterday. That's kind of new for me. I've never been into that. But lately, I found them a little cute. When we met Brother Rob and Sister Marcy, and they took us to some flea market near Pigeon Forge. I forgot the name of it. And they had this thing of puppies. I might have looked at it and been like, yeah, aren't they cute? I don't know. For some reason now I'm like, I want to hold one. And so I went over and I held it, and he let me hold it. But when my wife held that puppy, I don't know. What did I do wrong? It nestled in her neck like it was her baby. Yesterday, I held the puppy here. It was sweet. It wagged its tail. But when other people held the puppy, it nestled in for comfort. I didn't elicit that. I held the puppy, but not as effectively as others. Why would I not think the same couldn't be about truth? I may know things. I may can repeat everything I've heard and everything I've learned, but what spirit do I present it with? What is that creating in somebody? That puppy knows when it gets to someone who's, I don't know why, but my wife may not want to hold a baby, but now she'll hold a dog and she'll hold a puppy. And when I watched her in that place we were at in Tennessee, because I promise, I held it. I thought I was doing pretty good, and it did good with me. But man, it just like it changed when she got it. And it went right in her neck like it was her baby. And I thought, isn't that cute? But it didn't do that with me. But that's all right. That's just a silly example. But when I heard this mentioned from brother in that message I was listening to, for me, these are largely personal reflections, I guess. I was like, wow. That was wow. A kind of a wow moment for me as a Christian. The man in this picture can hold every truth that belongs to his company. He can have them memorized. He can use them every day. There's a lot of things I've heard in my life. There's a lot of truth that I've experienced, and I may have them in here. But man, for me to really think about what spirit do I present them with? I don't want to have truth in unrighteousness, truth in error, because the error is the way I present it, the way I share it. But if that man in that photo is presenting everything he knows to others with a spirit of superiority, then he's holding truths in an unrighteous way. Who in here would want to work with someone like that? Who wants to work with someone who, yeah, you may respect they know everything, but God forbid you have a question. God forbid you ask someone else. What? I mean, they have this air of superiority about them, this air of like they walk on eggshell thread. And I don't want to be like that with other people. Because if you are willing enough and vulnerable enough to share something with somebody, what is it reasonable to expect sometimes? A question. It is reasonable to expect that someone will question. It's reasonable that someone will challenge. That's just life. If you're not used to thinking being challenged, it would be a very unfortunate, difficult existence in the world, wouldn't it? You just have to expect that. But who in here would want to work with an individual who has this air of superiority, and the way they present things just make you feel oppressive and you feel suppressed? And I thought about, you wouldn't want that in the workplace. But then it's like, think about that as a spiritual application. I'm very thankful for truth that God has allowed me to hear in my life. I'm very thankful that I've been blessed to hear messages of victory over sin. There's nothing wrong with being thankful for that. But I don't need to have a haughty spirit when it comes to people who maybe are more limited in their understanding. If someone just immediately interacts with me and they think, oh, he pities me, how offensive. I'm presenting it in the wrong spirit. And I may feel badly for what someone's been taught, but God help me to be cautious. You can hold a puppy, but some people have a natural ability. You can hold a baby. But for some people, those babies are held much more comfortably in their arms. That sweet lady, Miss Judy, here yesterday was very good with the babies. She's a natural. You could just tell. So how do I hold truth? Someone can know it. Someone can have it. Someone can understand it. But it doesn't mean that it's held very naturally, that others can witness and see. And that is for me. God help me to be very cautious with that. In 1 John 4:1, beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. In what I was listening to, the dear brother explained that the verse references that we should not believe every spirit, but we have a responsibility to try the spirits. And this is something he pointed out that I thought was very interesting. The verse doesn't instruct us to try the truth. Because you know what? You're going to encounter people who have a wonderful spirit and they're living in everything they know. But if the first goal is to challenge them and try and challenge their understanding of truth, guess what can happen? They put up a wall. You've overstepped the bounds. It's overstepped in the way this was presented, to try the spirit. Someone's spirit will testify to you whether or not they are open, right? and whether or not they are sincere. There are people who may not have a clear understanding of spiritual matters, of doctrines, of specific truths, but they have the Spirit of God, and it's okay to try them as you spend time with them. It takes time to understand some people. As you get to know them, as you show them that you care about them, that takes time. Often that's more than just a simple introduction, isn't it? Often that's more than a simple casual encounter. It takes purposeful effort as a person who says, if I'm saying I'm a Christian, then it's purposeful effort. When I try the Spirit to see how someone is, then you spend time with them. And you find out whether or not they have a right spirit. God can show people truth in his own timing. He pointed out, as I was listening, that it's not my call. He may have said it that way, but I can put it on myself for certainly too, also. It is not my call to decide God's timing for when someone's ready for certain truths. Paul made this clear, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit until we all come to the unity of the faith. He was saying we need to make an endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit and be patient with other people until they come to the unity of the faith, until God opens their understanding. There is a reason the Bible says to be patient with all men. And I appreciated that. I thought, God, please, because anybody, when you've worked with someone and you've tried to be an example, the devil wants you to just get frustrated. Like, why this? This just feels disrespectful. This just feels like, what are you even thinking? But try the Spirit, but also God help me to have the right spirit when I present things. Because you can do things out of anger, frustration, arrogance, haughtiness, and you undo a lot of history of good that you've had with somebody if not careful. Often when people begin a job, what are they often in? A trial period of training. Isn't that how people begin on jobs? So when I was reflecting on this is what I thought about. They're not permanent immediately. My wife at the university, this is how they do things. She had a 1 year, I think it's a probationary period, because they give the person a year to gain understanding, to learn the job, and then see how they're doing, and then they can possibly secure their position at the university. Thankfully, she did, and she's been there for a few years now. At the end of that year, she got a letter telling her that she was off that probationary period and had the rights as an employee. She now had those rights because she had earned it. But it took what? Time. Her workplace had a chance to try her, but they had to get to know, work with her, and spend time with her to know if she was a fit and to see how well she'd work out. But she was given time. The man in the photo does not give off the vibe that he'd be a very patient, understanding individual, does he? He looks a little harsh and brash. If not careful, such people do not give employees a fair chance. In the real world, we know that can happen. They are quickly dismissive of those that they find less deserving. The man might be applying many rules of his company, but is he applying them fairly? Do I do that to people who, when you try the Spirit and the Spirit is good, do I apply the understanding I have from God fairly to them and where God knows they are in their spiritual walk? If I don't, then if I'm not careful, I can present something to them in an unrighteous way without meaning to even be that way. I can hold the truth, but it doesn't mean that it's given off very well. And you think about that application as a Christian. Am I applying truths in ways to encourage and uplift others, or am I using truth, God forbid, as a slaughtering tool by being too harsh and judgmental of others? Because I don't want to be the spirit of a Pharisee, as they say. So these are several examples that I won't read every verse, but I'll mention them quickly. So the characteristics of having the spirit of a Pharisee, if you read in Luke 18, 9 through 14, they trusted in their own righteousness while despising others. Oh, look at me. And I don't want to be that way either. When that brother mentioned about being cautious of how even using the phrase, we have the truth, it really makes you think. You don't want to be demeaning. You don't want to devalue someone else. If you imagine someone could offhandedly hear that and be like, who does he think he is? So I thought, that's fair. Being very cautious. Having and holding is one thing. Presenting is something totally different. And what it can do when it's presented in error, even if it's unintentional. Doing spiritual acts to be admired by people. I don't want to fall prey to that, and I don't necessarily think anybody would want to do that. In Matthew 23, 5 through 7. In Matthew 23, 6 through 12, seeking titles, status, and honor. Appearing righteous outwardly while neglecting inward holiness. Matthew 23, 27 through 28 is an interesting concept. People can hold the truth, and visually it may appear they're holding truth, but they hold it in such a way that the spirit is bad. That negates in many ways the good that may be present. Majoring on minor rules while neglecting justice, mercy, and faith. Matthew 23, 23, and 24. Imposing burdens on others without compassion. And that's often what you think about someone who's harsh like that. The manager or boss or whatever in that picture. Often they can impose burdens. This is what the company mandates, and they don't really have any compassion for what it may mean for an employee. And it's very easy to think of, well, it's this, with absolutely zero compassion for what did me presenting the truth in that way do to someone else. God help me to be careful. I don't want to present it in error. Valuing human traditions over God's commands. Mark 7, 6 through 9. Looking down on those perceived as less spiritual. John 7, 49. Boasting should be in what? Jesus. It ain't about me anyway, is it? Looking down on resisting correction because of pride. John 9, 39 and 40 through 41. Loving the approval of people more than the approval of God. John 12, 42 through 43. One important observation when you look at traits that might have been of the Pharisees, whom Jesus was pretty plain with, wasn't he? Is that Jesus didn't condemn them for caring about obedience to God's law itself. In fact, in Matthew 23, verses 2 and 3, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore, whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do. But do not ye after their works. Don't do it the way. They may have held certain truths, but don't do it in the way that they did it. Don't follow your work after them, for they say and do not. His strongest rebukes were directed at pride, hypocrisy, self-exaltation, and hearts that sought human glory while neglecting mercy, justice, and genuine devotion of God. In a sense, they had, what could be called a Pharisee spirit. In Mark 7, 6 through 9, and I'm going to end up here soon. He answered and said unto them, well hath Esaias prophesied of you hypocrites, as is written, this people honoreth me with their lips, but with their heart is far from me. Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines and commandments of men. For laying aside the commandment of God, ye hold the tradition of men, as the washing of pots and cups and many other such like things ye do. And he said unto them, full well ye reject the commandment of God, that ye may keep your own tradition. If the man in the photo goes to a work conference, and I don't know if I have been very fortunate in my work history with people in leadership. I've been very blessed. But I can only imagine. If that man in that photo goes to a conference about his job and he learns a technique, a new strategy that could save his employees heartache and trouble, it should be his duty to share that new information, shouldn't it? You would think. That should be his job. I have new understanding. About this job. Therefore, it is my duty to what? Share it. If you in your own jobs had a boss attend a conference, learn something that would help you or a coworker, you'd expect him to tell you. I think y'all get the common sense of that. But what if your boss doesn't tell you because he simply doesn't want to change how he's always done things? What if your boss doesn't tell you because it goes against what he learned when he was trained for the job? As a teacher, I tell students, I try to teach them the value of learn, be a learner. But who will be the example before them of what it means to truly be a learner? Me. They will watch me. If I make a mistake, or if I learn something new and I need to go back and correct it, or I need to reevaluate what I've shown them, that is my job to demonstrate that's part of being a learner. We want our boss, I can use my job. On your own jobs, you would want your boss to do that. But as a person of faith, to also incorporate the best attitude about that too. So what if the boss comes back and he does nothing? He doesn't even encourage you. This would be so awful. To research what he learned on your own, even just enough to say, hey, yeah, we learned this. It's up to you if you want to learn it, because God forbid he make a change. On the job, that's very frustrating, isn't it? It can be very maddening. Why would someone be this way just because he doesn't want to change how he thinks or feels? To me, that's mind-boggling. I live in a job of it's actually cyclical change. They'll say, if you stay in education long enough, it comes back, and that's about the truth. I can give you an example. The boss values tradition over new knowledge and new understanding. A boss who hides new understanding that could help and encourage his employees is not effective. That's not being an effective person in that role at all. As a matter of fact, they're just trying to be like that man in that photo. They need to reflect and change. If they're hiding knowledge from employees, it's because they're probably threatened by the knowledge. They don't want to make a change from what they've known or what they've learned or how they've done it. How well do you think that man in our photo would probably take hearing something and realizing that he was wrong? Probably not well. His presence doesn't make me think that he's too ready to admit it, and that's scary. And I don't need to have that spirit either, though. I'll put it on me. I don't need to have that spirit. I need to be careful that I don't act like I'm above others and they're beneath me. And then, this is one thing on a job. But when I think about this in light of what it means to learn and understand truth, I mean, it makes me almost my heart. That scares me. That's scary to me. That makes me say my soul matters. It matters. My soul, I will give an account to God. My duty is to my soul. My duty is not to a person, a place, a group, an organization. I will stand before God to give an account for me. And you can insert whatever other example you could put in that statement. Those are just things that popped in my head preparing. I want to hear God's truth. On the job, you might switch departments to get away from that manager because you know they won't change with new knowledge. And as a result, they're making your job harder. They're making you limited, aren't they? They are making you limited on your job because they refuse to go contrary to what they've always heard, what they've always learned, and what they've always done. Oh, I'm not having any of that. But yet they expect their employees to do what they say. As a teacher, I expect my students to do, but I am the ultimate lesson of learning, the ultimate example, aren't I? Our managers on our jobs can be that way too. And again, I've worked for good people, so no one try to infer. You might get away from that individual because that's not fair to you. And I really thought about how my soul is of much greater importance. The Bible verse says, full well ye reject. And you can put in, it reads commandments, but you could put in there new light, anything that the devil would want to use to make someone reject, that ye may keep your own traditions. Pharisees were rejecting commandments. Well, am I rejecting truth so that I can just do that which is convenient for Danny? I mean, often, why do people not want to change? Because it's inconvenient. It's an inconvenient truth. It is inconvenient to the way they've always heard it, always learned it. And even if presented with something very valid, very compelling, very, very solid based in what is truth, there are people who will not want to change that which is convenient, that which they have always learned and heard. And that to me is frightening. When I think of my years of church and being told, as you hear, as you learn, as you gain new light, you listen, you grow, you ask God to show. But at some point that gets to stop because some people decide certain things are inconvenient or go against what they've heard. But yet I'm expected to do this or to do that. That's not fair to anybody, is it? You can think about it on the job as an analogy. That would be very frightening to me. But I'm also a human. It's sometimes easier to fall prey to doing that which feels convenient and comfortable. I know. I mean, I'm as human as the rest of anybody. I need God's help and wisdom. A boss has a duty to his employees to share new information that can give them a better understanding of how to do their jobs more efficiently. I have a duty to my soul to make sure it's nourished in God's truth. My boasting should be in Jesus, not in ideas that people wish to perpetuate, not in notions that are convenient and comfortable to people just because it's what they wanted or wish to hear. Just like on a job, people can micromanage from a boss perspective to the point they make people miserable because they want it done their way. But yet someone else may have something that's more effective, but they're closed off. People can suffer from I even Googled how to pronounce this word. I had it phonetically done out for me in parentheses, and I don't have that in this document. Pharisaical spirit, when they succumb to the notion it's my way or the highway. That is a Pharisaical notion. The highway, I'm sorry, that's God's way. It ain't about Danny. It ain't about me. The highway is God's way. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light, not me and what I want to be, my notions. So when I listen to something of this nature, I need to humble myself and say, Lord, let me be careful how I hold truth. You can watch someone hold a baby and recognize, oh, that baby ain't comfortable. You can watch me hold a puppy and be like, oh, he needs to give it back to Rhonda. But holding truth is much more severe. That is significantly serious. And God help me to be careful. I have not attained. I'm still breathing, which means I'm still learning, which means I'm still growing. And I need to be open to whatever light the Lord would wish to show me. I would never advocate compromise or things of that. But a person can hold truth in arrogance and self-righteousness, and as a result, they hold truth in unrighteousness. And this will not help anybody. That is something I learned from just listening. Brother Mullins mentioned in his message, there is always room for God to shine more light on my path. The longer I live, it should get brighter, shine brighter and brighter unto the perfect day, meaning I get more understanding. So I found that verse, Proverbs 4:18. But the path of the just is as the shining light that shineth more and more into the perfect day. So for me to walk away from this with an understanding, I want to have a spirit that is willing to learn, to grow, and to shine more and more into the perfect day. Brother Mark.
That was really good. Appreciate that. Good message in the lesson this morning. That's good. I was thinking, he's using work for a lot of examples. I was thinking, about some of the rules at work, how they're presented. You can take just like our safety policy or whatever that we have to, wear earplugs and safety glasses and things. You could present that and say that's in the rule book. That's what you're going to do. You're going to get wrote up if you don't use them. Or you could let people know that it's really because to keep something out of your eye. You could say we have a safety huddle every morning before we start work and read off whatever. But you could start off and say, if you catch you with them safety glasses off, I know it's hot today and they're going to get sweaty, but you've got to wear them. You're going to get rode up. Or you could say, I know your glasses are going to sweat up, so find a safe place to clean them, but keep them clean so you don't get hurt, so you can see what you're doing. Be a little more patient. But I was just thinking about how things are presented like on the job. And unfortunately, a lot of people get it in their head that it's just rules. But when somebody explains why this is good for you, why it's good to have your safety equipment on, it's for your benefit so you ain't hurting. It hurts to get something in your eye. It ain't just taking you away from work, which matters too, but it's about your safety. And that's the way it is about living the things of God. Why would this be good for me to live this way? Why is it good for me to live a holy life? Really good thoughts this morning. I had a lot of things come in my mind, and that's just so good. Lord, help me to be very careful with my self and how I present myself and present the things that God, because just like those safety glasses, unfortunately, just like those safety rules at work, a lot of people, and it don't have to be Church of God or whoever, when they think about church, it don't even matter where it's at. They start thinking of a bunch of rules. You have to do this. You have to do that. We need to know why. Why is that good for you? Why is it good to live that way? So that's just really, really good. We'll take a little bit of a break and then we'll move on with the service shortly. Glad to have Brother Ricky with us this morning.